A long time ago now, I stated that I'd never played a decent game based off of Judge Dredd. Lots of people have offered Dredd vs. Death as a response to that, which is fair enough, I suppose. I've not played it, unfortunately. And guess what? I'm not playing it today. We're doing a Judge Dredd video, yes, but it's a video on the licensed game based off of the 1995 film. Thanks to Ian Roberts for making this request. So yes, it's a licensed game based off a stinker of a film. But hey, it's good to examine how we get there, if nothing more than just an excuse to talk about Judge Dredd, because I love Judge Dredd. Did you know that his name was originally inspired by Judge Dredd, who was the second biggest selling reggae artist in the UK in the 1970s behind Bob Marley? Do you know what Judge Dredd's music sounds like?
S6 on the dot, it's up with the cock, up with the cock, up with the cock, S6 o'clock.
Yeah, that. Oh, hey, Yanks, if ever a snobby Brit tells you that we have taste and you don't, show them this. Did you also know that his appearance was based on David Carradine's character of Frankenstein in Death Race 2000? And honestly, it hasn't changed an awful lot since. From the first issue to now, Dredd has always been the same. He hasn't needed to change an awful lot. Dredd is one of those true constants that make you proud to be British. I still recall being dumbstruck back in the 90s reading 2000 AD. And that wasn't even a high point for the comic, those were the years when John Wagner wasn't writing Dredd, but the surroundings and the characters definitely hit on something. If I'd kept reading 2000 AD, maybe I'd have improved my drawing and gone into comics instead. Who knows? As it is, I don't know much about comics, to be honest with you, but I know what I like, and I like Judge Dredd. If you said I could have one single comic book character to read and nothing else, I would pick Dredd without question. Simple, occasionally controversial, captivating post-apocalyptic goodness. It feels like adapting Judge Dredd to almost anything should be a layup, which is why the lack of much decent Dredd outside of the comics has always been baffling. There's always a failure to just understand the simple things, and they are so simple, that make Dredd work. And of course there's no bigger example of that than the 1995 movie. Silly I am the law memes aside, it managed to get basically everything wrong. Even Sly Stallone considers the whole thing to be a missed opportunity that he's quite unhappy with. In fact, he probably thinks that Over the Top was better than Dredd. It was just so disappointing in every way, nothing like the comic that I'd read. I am just thankful that in the end Dredd did get a good film adaptation. Seriously, the recent movie is one of the best action movies of the past 25 years and it nails the comic perfectly. I hope for similar from the TV series that's in development, especially if it does actually manage to land Carl Urban, who seriously is note perfect as the character. And of course, back in those heady days of 1995, the 16-bit era and all that, the big action movie has to have the licensed game. Which brings us to the whole licensed game process. How do you make a successful adaptation of an adaptation? Especially when said adaptation is not successful. You're not exactly given much to work with, and when the game's published by Acclaim, hell, you're not really meant to do much that's high concept with it. And so Judge Dredd is always going to be straightforward, a side-scrolling action platform adaptation of the movie that's mostly based around shooting things. Such games usually aren't that interesting. What is somewhat interesting is seeing if anything extra from the comic books managed to make it into the game, and in the case of this one, a fair few things did. As far as the game goes, well, by and large it isn't that good. The majority of the missions feature two objectives, a primary one that you have to complete and a secondary one, and most of them aren't that special, just blow up some crates here, or lock some doors, meaning that most levels are the same in that you need to explore every nook and cranny of them. If you proceed carefully and make sure to go down all the paths so you don't miss everything, you'll be alright. If you do miss something, well, get ready for backtracking, lots of it. Most decidedly not fun, especially as most of the levels, especially in the first half of the game, are thoroughly mundane and boring. The weird thing about this game as an adaptation is that really only half of it is actually based on the movie. In that half, as in the movie, you start out doing basic Judge Dredd things in and around Mega City 1, then you are framed for a murder by your evil clone Judge Rico. You go to the Cursed Earth to find all this out from the dying Judge Fargo, and then eventually you kill Rico atop the Statue of Liberty. Pretty simple and pretty lame. There's just not much of interest in the Judge Dredd movie because it's shit, and it seems that Probe, the folks who developed the game, felt that way too. And so the second half of the game introduces the real primary antagonists of the Dredd universe, the four Dark Judges, Mortis, Fear, Fire, and the most iconic of them all, Judge Death. In the end, Dredd has to go to the Dead World to face the Dark Judges and defeat them once and for all. It is very odd to have a generic licensed game where the second half is better than the first. Usually, because these games are developed linearly, the game just runs out of steam in the second half and levels often appear to be half finished. True Lies, which is generally very good for the first half at least, is a good example of this, although the absolute grand example is Jurassic Park Trespasser, a game where there's almost nothing in the second half simply because the developers ran out of time. As it is, the gameplay in Judge Dredd remains of the same largely poor standard the whole way through, but at the very least the environs in the later levels are more interesting than any of the stuff they've taken from the movie, by virtue of being taken from the comics. I at least credit the folks behind the game for padding it out in this way, as otherwise there would have been absolutely bugger all here. In the end though, it's just not fun. Judge Dredd is a bad side-scroller. The controls are fidgety, especially when you're trying to get Dredd to climb ladders and stuff, it's a pain in the ass, or jumping properly, running, that's also a pain in the ass, the camera, that's a pain in the ass. Fighting enemies is mindless, you just stand and shoot them with your lawgiver. Occasionally an enemy will give up and you can arrest them. This is likely to happen if you get close to them, I think, but there are just two options to approach people in this game. Get close to them and run the risk of them not giving up, thus losing health due to the game's shit hand-to-hand combat, or just shoot them, ideally in a way that involves you not getting shot. I tend to choose the latter, especially because health is at a premium and there's no continues in this game, although there are passwords. The worst part of all is the bosses, which are so badly made. There's little you can do against them except for just firing the most powerful weapons you've got and hoping for the best. There's just no strategy involved at all. As intriguing as it might be to play at times due to the additions that Probe made, the game is not fun in the slightest. Overall, much like the film, the game is just another missed opportunity for Judge Dredd. If only someone had just decided to make a proper Dredd game without the film licence ruining it. Mind you, I say that, but then I remember the UK computer Judge Dredd game that came out courtesy of Virgin back in 1991. That was even worse than this game is. If you do fancy playing this game, then it's probably best on the SNES. That version is by all accounts considerably better made than the Mega Drive one I've been playing, and features some more different levels like a driving section and such, although it's still not exactly good. Better games were to come for Dredd, at least. Although seriously, the whole Dredd universe deserves a true classic of a game, a proper open world cop simulator in a post-apocalyptic universe. The potential is there, but we've just not had it yet. For now though, it's time to take off the helmet, set down our lawgiver, and put our boots up. My next request is a game that's going to be considerably more involved. Bye for now. Many thanks for watching this video. Please do like it if you did like it. You can also subscribe to the channel, check my Facebook, my Twitter, all of that good stuff that's in the description. I would once again especially like to thank Ian Roberts for requesting this video on Judge Dredd. I kinda wish he'd requested Dredd vs Death, but hey, the 1995 movie is always a quite fun subject. Maybe I'll even do that in a vid someday. If you'd like to request anything then, you can of course check that out on my Patreon. Now, I would like to thank the following people for this video: Adam Schaefer, Andrew Dalton, Andy Capt, Oddie Sorley, Chris Wilkins, Conformist, Dustin Cooper, Gary Pinkett, George Newton, Guatham Blackpaw, Ian Roberts, James Idd, James Loveridge, Jason Goy, Jason Leach, Jason Stevens, Johan Eriksson, John Scott, Keith Barlow, L. O'Brien, Lee Norris, ManagerSim.net, Mark Heslop, Mark Johnston, Mark Whittington, Martin Pataki, Nanette McCrone, Olaf Albeen, Pete Morris, Phil Taprog, Potter Margell, Rachel Maxwell, Romeo, Sean Zoltek, Seth Robinson, Simon Gulliver, Taylor Armand, The Unnatural, Tanya J, Twisted Squote, and V. Shardy.